Hello and welcome to the British Strength Podcast, the only podcast on earth hosted by the only three British citizens ever to be ordained as starting strength coaches. I am Jack Bissett, that is Carl Ragavan, and that is Byron Johnston. And today we are going to talk about why we do the lifts the way that we do them. And for me, it all boils down to the three criteria, our three exercise selection criteria. Whenever we're approaching a lift with strength training in mind, we're looking to perform the lift in a way that will incorporate the most amount of muscle mass over the largest effective range of motion in a way that will allow us to lift the most weight. And it's important that I bring that up front because we're going to keep referring back to that as we go through. That's like the underlying theme over the next two episodes. So keep that in the back of your head, dear listener. And we'll get the ball rolling with perhaps one of Starting Strength's most iconic lifts, the squat. Who wants to open on the squat?
Oh, I think
Ladies
Carl
first. Oh. Well, the one with the biggest squat. Yeah, sure. I know a few things about the squat. So the squat that we like to use, there is a word for it that people like to call it. They say it's a low bar squat, but we just class the lift as squat because of the three criteria that Jack just talked about. That is what we call the squat, and that is the kind of base template for building strength. There's so many reasons and caveats to like why it is the way it is. And usually it's kind of funny because whenever you see someone do the squat with the exact technique that we do it, pretty much you can walk up to that person and say, "Are you doing starting strength?" And that person will reply, "Yes." That's kind of how obvious it is. And the main features, I would say, obviously the bar is placed in that low bar spot, which is the spine of the scapula. The reason why we like it in that low bar position is for force production. So we've realized that the strongest way to squat is by using your hips. Yes, the knees are working when you squat because anytime you bend your knees, all the musculature of your legs are going to work when you bend your knees. But when it gets heavy, and this happens with every heavy squat, even a high bar, even a front squat, it sounds really controversial, but it's true. You use your hips, and that bar placement where it's sat on the back, that's actually going to be the most stable place. So when you use your hips, you're actually going to be pretty damn solid. So that's the first thing for me that kind of shows that this is like the squat, the low bar position. The second thing, which we do for a starting strength squat, is a thumbless grip, right? And again, many powerlifters do this similar low bar squat, but they have their thumb around the bar. And the reason why they do it thumbs around, God knows why. There's probably belief that somehow the bar is going to be more stable. They can get more tight in their back, rah-de-da-da. We don't think like that. What we're trying to do with a thumbless grip is primarily just secure the bar with the palm. It's your palm pushing into the bar and your fingers wrap around. Thumbless being because the weight should be going down on your back, right? It shouldn't be held in your hand. And sometimes that I've done this myself, or some clients can do thumb around grip. But a lot of the time when people change from a thumbless to a thumb around grip, they get a lot of pressure through their wrist and elbows. So you can already get a lot of that from just doing low bar, but you can really get that when you do thumb around grip. So we like a thumbless grip. And then the last piece for me, which makes it iconic to how we squat, is we look slightly down, which is actually a misquote. We're actually looking about 6 feet, or I don't know, like 2 meters down on the floor. And we're looking at a spot the whole time for balance. And it actually allows us to utilize our hips a lot better as well. So to me, those three things: low bar position, thumbless grip, eyes looking slightly down. When anytime you see that, that is pretty much how we like to squat. And pretty much people have classed it the ripper toe squat, but it's just the squat. That's what we've realized works the best. And I guess the other key feature that makes this a squat is squatting to depth. So the crease of your hip needs to go just below the top of your patella. If you do all those things, and you're wearing stable lifting shoes. You know, that's the other thing that a lot of people I've seen on boards and different forums that pisses me off. They'll ask for a form check and they'll do a high bar squat in their socks, their white, dirty socks. I'm just like, are you taking the piss? Like, you want us to spend time critiquing your dirty, scummy, white socked high bar squat? No. Read the book and learn how to do some low bar and put on some goddamn lifting shoes, you fucking idiot. Like, what is wrong with
I
you?
would say I would take dirty, scummy white socks over people getting their bare paws out all over the platform.
Even still,
I'd take the stinky socks over people getting their toes all over the place. Let's just keep your shoes and socks on in the gym, people. We don't need to be letting the dogs out.
yeah. And then as a squat gets progressively heavier, like we've already mentioned, lifting shoes are pretty much essential. Like, that's probably the first thing you need to buy. If you haven't bought weightlifting shoes and you're thinking about doing starting strength, buy weightlifting shoes. I don't care if you can squat perfectly without them. Trust me, you're going to need them to do this program correctly. It's going to make so much more sense. Like, just buy lifting shoes. And then perhaps the other additional thing that will happen as you get more experienced is then you might want to then invest into a decent weightlifting belt. But that to me is the kind of key criteria. That person's wearing lifting shoes, they're squatting to depth, the bar is low bar position, thumbless grip looking down, and of course, they're doing sets of 5.
5 with the hip drive.
So yeah, that to me is like an iconic squat. And usually that person will then respond with, yes, I'm doing starting strength. Oh, you know Mark Ripperto? Yeah. Yes, I know Mark Ripperto. Really? Yes, we email time to time. Yeah.
So, you know, you've highlighted the key features there, I think, of the squat. And there's a couple, like, we can link those back to those criteria, right? So that low bar position helps us to get a more horizontal back angle as well, right? So we're more bent over in the low bar squat than we would be in a high bar or a front squat, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. And you know, they'll ask about, like, well, why are you squatting like that? Why are you bending over like that?
Looks wrong, doesn't it, to them?
Yeah, because most people will stay upright, right? They'll be looking at videos of, you know, athletes in scare quotes on Instagram or whatever. They'll be trying to stay bolt upright, and that is not the way we do it, right? We're super bent over, and the reason for that is we're deliberately sort of manipulating the moment arms of the movement to put more of the stress onto the hips in the drive of the squat.
I would go one further. I would go one further and say bar placement and midfoot are always the same. It just depends on your build, but those things are always going to be a 1-to-1. You're always going to be in a straight line, but it just looks different depending on how you're built, right? If you have a long torso versus short femurs, or long femurs versus short torso. But the bar placement is more a case of it allows us to use our hips more, right?
Yes.
Because if any of you have done a heavy, like this, let's put it this way, right? If any of you have done a heavy front squat, right? If you use your hips to the same degree that you low bar, that bar is going on the floor, right? It's gone. It's off. So it's a case of how much can you utilize your hip drive, because even in an overhead squat, you can use your hips. And I would argue you can use your hips quite a lot in an overhead squat.
Yeah, you can.
You can, right? It works. Yeah. But in a front squat, you can use them a little bit, but not to the same extent as a low bar, because that bar is really secure back there and you can put all of the musculature into it. But it's more a case of the degrees of hip drive, right? If we were to put them in a series of how much hip drive you can use, it would be on one end of the scale is front squat, and then on the far end of the scale is low bar.
Yeah, so I think you're completely right there. And for the casual viewer, the reason I think you know, I want to emphasize why the hip drive is important is because that is what best satisfies those first criteria, right? By driving the hips, you are incorporating more muscle mass into the movement, and you can therefore lift more weight. It's not a coincidence that your low bar squat is always stronger than your front squat. It's down to that hip drive. That's why we are biasing that in the way we select for the squat. And it's also the same. It's also the same with the depth, right? Like you'll see plenty of people who, can go either way. You'll see, I've had plenty of athletes of varying kinds, rugby players and swimmers, who've said, "Well, my coach has told me to quarter squat because that's mimicking, the push-off position in the ruck, or that's mimicking the angles that my legs will be when I push off the wall to drive myself through the pool, right?" And you're getting a trade-off there.
You could call it a functional pattern, perhaps.
Yeah. It's a functional squat, but you're not satisfying the criteria as well there. Like you can quarter squat more than you can full squat, but you're not getting the range of motion. You're probably not using as much muscle mass, and it's not going to make you grow as well. It's not going to make you as strong.
Yeah. So when you get an athlete like that, if you've got an experienced lifter who says, "Oh, I've got my squat," and they give you a big number on the squat, and you think, and they've had training with an S&C coach or something of that nature in their club, even then, it's almost going to be back to the linear progression, and the depth is going to have to come down. It's going to have to be fixed, even if they're serious about what they thought they were doing.
Yeah, when they give you that number, it's almost the real number is also almost certainly not the same.
Yeah.
And it's the same. You'll see people squatting real deep as well, right? You'll get that super ass to grass crowd. And again, there you're not lifting as much weight. You're slackening off the hamstrings. A lot of people will be rounding their lower back to get down that deep. They just don't have the mobility to get down there. It's less efficient. You're not gonna move as much weight, and so it's that even the way we've selected for depth is there to maximize all of these things. No part of it is arbitrary.
I think for someone who's also just starting out, who's not very strong, but maybe they've had a little bit of personal training, or they've seen squatting, or they've tried to do it themselves, and they're just coming to this. Probably the two things that if you're that person, probably the two things you'll notice that are going to feel strange when you first start doing this, according to what we're describing, is one, the bar is going to feel a little bit lower on your back than where it was before, and two, you're going to be more leaned over than you are used to. And both those things are correct. It might feel weird at first, but go with it. It's correct, and it will pay dividends.
Well, go on, Carl.
No, I was just going to say, like, the back angle thing, I think it's very on brand for us to be like, bend your nipples to the floor and all this, and get and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, to be honest, like, it is correct for a lot of people. But again, like, as you get more experienced and more refined with looking at different people and squatting enough, the back angle does change from lifter, right? So I would say my earlier years of squatting, I probably was trying to forcefully lean too far forward. But because of my frame, I'm a little like mixed Asian dude, right? My frame is actually more suited to more of an upright low bar squat. So my full depth low bar squat looks quite upright. So, that's the thing that changes over time. But for most people, yeah, that torso angle is going to be a little bit further forward. But I think what people don't realize about the back angle is it's the reason we're setting you into that place is so you come out with no change, right? So the back angle itself, we're laying you up for the slam dunk, which is when you're in the bottom of a heavy squat, we want you to drive up and the back angle not to move. Whereas what happens when people aren't in the right position is if they're bolt upright and then they finally use their hips and then they tip forward, and then that's the kind of negative connotation between low bar squatting, is that somehow you're doing a good morning. If you're not doing an arse to grass high bar squat, low bar is considered like a good morning. It's not a real squat, when that's just bollocks, because it's literally a case of constant back angle is another way to put it. We're setting you up so your back angle stays quite constant out of the hole. Whereas again, if you see someone do a really like heavy high bar squat, their back angle will change a little bit. It's very rare you'll see someone squat 300 kilos and they're just gonna go up and down like a piston. So, but aesthetically and to the inexperienced, unrefined eye, they'll just think a high bar squat, knees way forward, knees over toes, that is the gold standard of a athletic squat. When we see it not just as it needs to look athletic, it has all this criteria and it creates a response which is higher performance, right?
There's one other element I think about the squat, which you hear from time to time, which is, people will look at the way we squat, they'll look at the way we teach the squat, they'll look at the explanations that we've just given, and they'll say, yeah, but what about my quads? The squat should be a quad exercise, which is, that's Tom Platz, right? That's that very famous clip of Tom Platz in the gym talking about how by bending over when you squat, you've bastardized the squat, and the squat used to be a quad exercise. And when people say
Leg
that,
day.
yeah, for their legs, for their hacking leg day, when people say that, I think we're kind of missing each other. We're kind of missing each other's points. They're thinking in terms of body parts, right? Whereas we, in strength training, are thinking in terms of movement patterns. We are, and this movement pattern is squatting. It's squatting down and coming back up. And the way we've engineered the squat is to do that in the most effective and efficient way possible, not in the way that blasts the quads as aggressively as possible, right? It's like it's a
what's
different
funny
way of
about
thinking
that
about it.
analogy as well is that most of those people haven't been around big low bar squatters too. Like if you're someone who's, squatting 250 low bar or more than 250 kilos, 300 kilos more, those dudes have humongous legs. You can't say that, oh, they don't have any quads. So that again is usually to the peewees, the guys who are struggling to squat 100 kilos. Maybe they might be touching in 140 for a single. Those guys may not have great quads because they're squatting 140, right? That's not a heavy squat, right? So
Well, yeah, I've never worried about my quads.
yeah, your fucking legs are huge.
Well,
No need to
I
worry.
suppose a way you could look at it is just like, okay, if you were to do a more upright squat, if you were to do a real upright high bar or a front squat or something like that, or a hack squat, and you get all the bend in the knee, right? You put as much moment arm on the knee as possible, therefore putting as much stress on the quad as possible. You could say that was a more quad dominant squat. And I would agree with that assessment, but does it grow your quads as well? And I think there's an argument to be said there, no, because, all right, yeah, you've got more moment arm through the knees, you've got more of the total stress of that movement on the quads, but the overall stress is lower. You're using less weight because it's a more upright, less efficient squat. And I would say you've offset that in the correct squat by being able to handle more weight and more tonnage. Ultimately, there is only one thing that's going to extend your knee in the squat, whether you're bent over or you're upright. It's not like your quads aren't doing work in the regular squat.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
that's the funny thing that people don't realize, because we know a little bit more about anatomy than the average bodybuilder. So yes, what you're saying is true. Like high bar squats, hack squats, and all this leg extensions, they train your quads more. But like you just said, the only muscles that extend the knee are quadriceps, right? Whereas extending the hip, you've got all the posterior chain. You even got your adductors, your adductors. So you've got a lot more muscle mass to extend the hip, whereas any knee bend movement is going to be quadriceps. That's all, which is kind of funny because usually when someone's new to low bar squatting, or if they've had some time off for whatever reason, had to reset and come back to low bar squatting, that's usually the first thing I hear people tell me is, oh, my quads are sore today. but they're doing a classic low bar squat bent over using their hips. And it's primarily because they are the only muscles that can actually contribute to extending the knee.
Amen to that.
Hmm.
You got anything to add on the squat, Byron?
Yes, couple things.
Go, shoot.
Main thing I see from forums and comments is, no, you don't have an ankle mobility problem. That one seems to come up again. It's like a house ghost. It just will not clear out. So there's a real common belief that the ankle, literally, no matter what I've seen, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I have seen some comments before where it literally doesn't matter what the presenting problem is. It could be like wrist pain in the squat, and in the comments it'll be, but this is an ankle mobility situation of everything. So if I may, I'd like to lay this to rest. Finally, in the squat that we're describing, the low bar squat, the demand of the ankle mobility is actually quite minimal. You do not require a significant level of angle at the ankle. So just rest assured that that demand that you think is there is actually not there if you are performing it correctly. Okay. Other variants, for example, we discussed front squatting earlier, they place more of a demand on that range of motion, and there you may experience something. So if you've only done that, you might be quite sensitive to what your ankle can do and what it can tolerate. But in a low bar squat, it pretty much resolves that issue from the equation. Do you guys agree with that, what I've said there?
Yeah, 100%. I've seen it. I've met a couple people who struggle to squat to depth in flats or barefoot. But the second you put a shoe on them, I've never met anybody who was so immobile in the ankle that once you put a shoe on them, they couldn't squat down. I imagine there are cases out there of people who've been hobbled, like in Annie, or arthritis or something, where their ankle is just a fused like club foot. But for the most part, you're not going to have a problem with your ankle mobility.
Sure. I think the thing that you will have a problem with is, if you're in a commercial gym, is the mirror that is in front of the rack getting in the way. Now that you will have a problem with that. So if you can take that out of the equation, like Carl's got a way of taking that out of the equation, where he showed me right away, which is good old fashioned curtain, like that. No mirror. No mirror. And that mirror is incredibly distracting. So I say to people, if you can, cover the mirror somehow, even if it's like take an exercise mat, drape it over the rack so you can't see the mirror. If you can't do that, just take a baseball hat, put the cap at the front, like the peak of it, and just put that. Then now that you're looking down, that takes some of the mirror out of your eye, your vision, your peripheral vision. That will help you out a lot to do the thing we described about looking down, leaning over to the correct angle for you. That will tremendously help you with that.
Yeah, mirrors are really annoying. Any other squat points? No? Okay, well, after the squat, I'd say, arguably this is the most iconic thing, is the way we press. I've had plenty of questions about the squat, but I've had far more questions about the press when people see me pressing. What the hell are you doing?
Do you then say that it's your favorite exercise?
I then say this is my favorite exercise, and that this is why my shoulders are bigger than yours. So so what we would call the press, or the starting strength press, is characterized mainly by the hip throw, right? The start of our press is not it's not a strict standing military press. It's dynamic. We've got a dynamic start. We throw our hips forward, rebound off of that tightness to generate a bounce in the bar that gets the thing moving. Some people, that's real small. Some people, like our small Asian friend over there, it's bloody enormous. And it can, to someone who's not used to seeing it, it can look almost alarming, especially if that's then paired with a secondary layback. It's a very, very distinctive thing. You said, Carl, you see people in the gym doing the starting strength squat.
No one does our press. I've never seen anyone.
No one does our press. Even people doing the starting strength squat will end up
They'll usually
pressing.
strict press.
Yeah.
They'll usually strict press. They're super
I've never
rare.
seen it in the wild. I know of one person in the wild that I've come across. He's another coach, And what he's done is he's ripped off all the starting strength material and he's marketing it as his own thing. So he does the hip
Ooh.
throw, but that's beside the point. But the hip throw really challenges people, because the main thing people will ask is this cheating? Are you cheating? Like, that seems like cheating to me.
Can I add something, gentlemen? Jack?
Yeah, go.
What I would say
shoot.
is, here's something I'd like to add to that. To their eyes, what they think we're doing is a push press. They think it's that. They think the movement is coming from the knee, like a down up movement. And even instructors will sometimes, like I say, like PTs will look at that and go, "Oh, it's a push press." No, it is. This is not a push press. We've got to clarify that.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes because of the way the bar moves. When your hips travel forward, because the rules within strength lifting, which is squat, press, conventional only, deadlift, it's a very easy way to see the difference between a push press and throwing the hips. And the way you do it is you look at that person's waist. So if they're wearing a belt, is really obvious. But if you imagine around their waist where their belt buckle, where they normally would wear their belt buckle, the waist itself is traveling this way, right? So as you throw your hips forward, it goes forward and then back. What happens on a push press is it goes dink, that whole waist belt buckle region, it goes boink straight down. And it's so easy. Once you notice that from the hips, then you'll realize you're throwing them forward as opposed to dropping straight down.
So you kind of don't really want to try to look at the knees, because that's a bit of a trap, because as the hips go forwards, depending on how aggressive that throw of the hips is, sometimes you can get a hair of the knee unlocking, but that's not a knee, that's not a jump. That's just an artifact of that will sometimes occur.
Yeah, it's definitely a red herring.
My God, it's a trap.
Yeah,
it's a huge red herring. Yeah.
Yeah, so people will ask if it's cheating. They'll compare it to the push press, and they'll get real wound up about it. But again, you've got to refer back to those three criteria: greatest amount of muscle mass, longest effective range of motion, largest amount of weight. And when you apply that analysis to the hip throw, it ticks all the boxes, right? By incorporating the throw of the hips, you're incorporating a bunch more muscle mass into the movement in a dynamic way. You're slightly increasing the range of motion by causing the bar to drop at the start, and you can lift more weight. Like it's tick, tick, tick all the way down the line. And it's not the same as a push press, because push pressing, it's hard to repeat the push press, right? Like as the weight goes up, how do you know whether you've done more pressing or whether you've done more pushing? Or in other words, say you push press 60 kilograms and then next week you push press 65. How do you know whether you didn't just dip down a little bit more and get a more aggressive push out of the legs?
Yeah, you could argue
in a way
that,
though.
No, I was going to say the efficiency. I was going to say like the movement pattern maybe just got more efficient as opposed to like the muscles got stronger.
Yeah.
But now we're in that new problem territory. So when people are hearing this conversation that we're having, they might think, well, hang on a minute, this push press thing actually sounds like a good idea. But the problem is the weight will be too light for that to be an effective leg exercise. Okay, so the thing you think you're going to get from it, you won't get, and you'll devalue the training effect on the shoulder. So the one thing that we do want to do, you're going to compromise that. All right. So to clarify, the function of us moving our hips forwards is to get the head out of the way. All right. If you have a good and a solid start position for your press, probably we want to talk about that in a minute. Even that looks different when we show you a start position for a shoulder press than what you might see when people just go to do some shoulder pressing with a barbell in a gym, like a commercial gym. If they don't know that, what you'll see in them doing is take a very wide grip, their wrists will be bent, the bar's probably going to be on somewhere even on their chest or maybe a little bit higher. It's a completely different start position that you'll see us do, where the bar is damn near floating around the height of the chin. The arms are much closer to the sides, like packed in tight to the sides. It looks very different, but anatomically, when we do that, we have a problem that if we were to push the bar straight up, you're going to take your nose off. All right. So we've got an anatomical problem. So the way we solve for that is by moving and I mean under tension moving, not getting loose, but under tension, by the movement of the hips forwards, the head will clear out the way, and now we've got a clear line for that movement. That's the efficiency there, okay? So that's where we get the most amount of weight on the bar with the full training effect of the most amount of muscle mass. That's how we capitalize on that, all right? Hopefully that's cleared that up a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's the classic starting strength press. The more those of us who get really into pressing, most people tend to develop to some extent or another then the second layback that comes after the initial movement. It's not something that we necessarily teach, certainly not right out of the gate, but for people who stick with the training, and particularly for the people who fall in love with pressing and want to pursue a bigger and bigger press, the second layback almost tends to materialize of its own accord. And that's another very distinctive marker, I would say, of our style of pressing, is that second layback. But people can get upset by that. People don't like the look of the second layback. A lot of people will worry about the integrity of your spine.
I wanted to ask that question.
And a lot of morons will say that you're basically doing a standing incline bench press. As someone who has mastered the standing incline bench press, what would you say to those criticisms, Carl?
Yeah, Carl. No. Let me go first, please. Carl, has anyone as yet run in a panicked fashion across the gym floor to intercept you during a press set, having seen you do this? Has it happened?
You're gonna hurt your back.
Oh my God! It's bad. Quick, the ambulance! Has it happened?
Well, I just pressed 150 at a gym, 150 kilos. No one ran up to me and said, "What happened to your back?" They all just were just like, what the fuck just happened? Because that was 150 kilos. So yeah, it's kind of funny, right? Because you've got the internet and then you got the real world. So the internet says that we're all fat, but then we also don't know how to lift weights. But when you go into the real world and you lift weights, you're twice the size of most people and you're stronger than most people in the gym. So yeah, I think it's just smoke and mirrors. Because I think what again people don't realize, the press, throwing the hips, double layback to me is throwing your hips twice, right? So just like you can't run if you don't know how to walk, if you haven't mastered the press, which we call just throwing the hips first, you're not probably going to get the double layback. Some of my guys still don't double layback. They still do a very strict press, and that's just their MO. They may never get it, or they may get it in a couple years from now. There is no coaching like method to create double layback. Like Jack says, it kind of happens out of thin air. But some people, again, it's just a flexibility thing. It's a confidence thing. It's also a case of there's this point of grinding. It's like the first couple of times you get stuck with a weight, some people will just stay there and then just grind it out and just kind of stand up with it. Whereas some people just have this reflex to just, when they get stuck, they just all of a sudden naturally start to lean back and they're like, oh, that works. So yeah, it's just one of them things.
I never deliberately planned or plan to double layback when I press. It just happens. Like I throw the hips, I get to that point, and then suddenly
it happens.
I'm back again.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen for me, so I can't relate to it. But does it just feel like you're kind of leaning into it a bit more?
Well, 2 out of 3 men, it's okay. It's okay, Byron. It's all right. 2 out of 3.
Byron's getting spit roasted on the press. It's
yeah.
Well, to me, it's exactly what Carl said. It feels like you throw your hips a second time, like and it's not something that's conscious. It's just like an automatic thing. It's like throw, and it's that quick as well, right? Because you throw the hips, the bar goes, and your hips are thrown back under it a second time. It's forward, back, forward again, and some people, I think, will just intuitively get that, and some people won't, and that's okay. I think part of it like Carl says, comes down to flexibility. I've got some people who can get a nice, lovely, long first throw on their hips and get a good up and down. And I've got some people who, no matter how many drills and stretches and different ways I try to approach it, their hips move like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and they get this tiny little boop. And like, that's fine. That's the best they're going to get. It's basically almost a strict press. But that's individual limitations.
What I will say though is I recently had a little bit of a back issue from doing some rack pulls, and that really tightened up my double layback. So if you're someone who's had like a lot of back spasms, or if you're someone who is very nervous of your back, that there's this level of trust and strength that happens. So I experienced this for a couple of weeks just gone. And when my back was really pissed off with me, all I could do was a little bit of the first reach, and then it was bolt upright into a strict press. So sometimes if you're someone who's had recurring back issues, then your back is going to be far more aggressive to wanting to stay upright. It's not because you can't do it, because over the past 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I'm now back to pressing 130 with a double layback. But it took me 5 weeks for my back to kind of calm down in a way and stop snapping at me, because the minute I wanted to lay back, it just got upright and then just kind of made me kind of strict press. So that can also be another thing. If you're in the back of the mind and you've had back issues, or you're not confident with moving your back in these shapes, it can inhibit you from actually doing things that won't hurt your back. But because, again, like, this lift has been like fossilized into becoming a dinosaur and we're kind of bringing it back, I think that's the thing. It goes to show the evolution of lifting has been more like what Byron said about the press is like this bullshit wide grip where it's like across your chest or shoulders. And
so ugly.
Maybe you'll see some dudes
do
some dumbbell press, but like, it's nothing like what we're doing. And when people see what we're doing, it's just completely so far off the spectrum. Sometimes just even trying to wrap their mind around, am I capable of doing the double layback? I think that can inhibit you from even trying to kind of pursue it, because you're like, oh, that really does look kind of a bit,
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So deadlifting, I'd say that's sort of the completes the big trifecta of the most starting strength type lifts, is the starting strength deadlift setup. And I would say that the way starting strength does the deadlift is probably the most widely adopted of all of its teachings. Like, I see plenty of people who have almost no association with starting strength at all. Coaches, I mean, using the 5-step setup. I feel like the 5-step setup has become quite mainstream in terms of how to do your deadlift.
When you see them do that, Jack, when you see it being taught, are they good teachers of it?
No, but they're no, but they're using the material, right? It's like the idea of the 5-step setup, and the concept that these are the steps you should follow in order to set up for the deadlift are, I think, fairly mainstream. Whether or not the people delivering that material are any good at it is, I think, a separate question. They might not be trying, like, those same people, they won't be teaching a hip throw on the press. They probably won't be teaching a low bar squat, but they will teach more or less our setup for the deadlift. I don't know whether that's just something I've been seeing, but
this is a funny one to me, because no matter what amount of weight I've deadlifted, that is probably the one lift where people will always come up to me. And you know what that question is, right?
Why are you wearing shoes, Carl? Carl, why are you in those shoes? Don't you know your deadlift would be bigger if you took your shoes off? You would deadlift more weight if you weren't wearing shoes. Something like that.
Pretty much that. People never come up to me and give me advice on the press, but the deadlift, people always want to come up and ask me shit about that.
Maybe 2 months ago, I took two ladies to a powerlifting meet. They both did their conventional deadlifts in shoes, the absolute queens, God love them. And one of the other coaches in the warm-up room, he sort of like sidled over to me and he stood next to me. And while one of them was pulling, he said, "How come you have them pull in Olympic lifting shoes?" And I just went, "Oh, it's just the way they've always done it. I ain't gonna change it now." I didn't want to get into it with him, but I could sense the judgment of the Ollie shoes. Everybody else was in those.
It gets them in there. It really does.
Oh, the shoes. Everybody else was in those daft bloody slippers. You know, the slippers. I'm sorry. They're so gay. It's so cringy when, you know, you're setting up for the deadlift. You've got this huge amount of weight on the bar and you're like, oh no, I can't deadlift yet. And you have to pull out this pair of little ballerina slippers out of your gym bag to put on your dainty little feet. It's shocking. The slippers are so cringe.
I can understand it if they're doing a sumo deadlift, but for conventional, you don't need flat shoes.
So, you know, we wear the shoes. Is there any particular thing other than that really makes the starting strength deadlift stand out as compared to a regular conventional? We can touch on the sumo and other anathema pulls, I suppose.
To me, it's two things. It's wearing our weightlifting shoes, right? And I'll talk about that right now. So again, this is the reason which I tell everyone in my own way to fuck off, mind your business, is I do Olympic lifts, right? I snatch and I clean and jerk, right? And if I do, you know, cleans on Monday, snatches on Wednesday, and then I do deadlifts on Friday, my ability to train midfoot and pull heavy off the floor is going to be different. So I want the variables to be the same. I want to have a deadlift that can translate to a clean and a snatch. And what that means is not doing snatch pulls or clean pulls. That's rubbish, right? It's getting a heavy deadlift in your weightlifting shoes. So to me, the reason we use shoes is that we train the power clean because we're starting strength, right? We teach all 5 lifts: squat, press, deadlift, bench, power clean. So if we're going to learn the power clean, we also need to be good at lifting in shoes. So usually that lets people kind of shoe and then they just leave me alone. But they will normally then say, oh, you probably should wear minimal Vibram finger slippers, whatever, to deadlift more. But, you know, 290 is all right for me. So I'm happy with 290. But anyways, my point being, that's the first thing, pulling in our weightlifting shoes. And the second thing is high hips. So we start with high hips. And, you know, it really does piss me off that you see people still do the kind of rolling starts. I don't know why people do that. They probably watched Magnuson when he did that crazy deadlift. That's probably where it started, right? All those strongmen who are really big. So again, being a bigger person, I feel their grief. When you have a bigger amount of stomach and a power belly, right, it's going to be hard for you to get the setup and get tight in a deadlift. So kind of rolling the bar in is kind of a way to get around getting tight off the floor. It's just a bro's kind of gym science way of trying to get tight. And that kind of took off because, again, when you see a lot of really elite people do things, you're like, well, you know, Eddie Hall rolls the bar in and, you know, Magnuson or whatever, they roll the bar. And so that became a bit of a thing. Nowadays, you don't see people rolling the bar as much on deadlifts. You still see it, but that's usually the thing, which is the thing. The dynamic start, again, because we keep our hips high and don't move them, that kind of goes hand in hand with the rolling of the bar. Is people might have their hips really low, almost like an arse to grass kind of squat. And as they roll it in, they pick it up. And then the first thing that happens is their butt shoots up, and that position that the bar or the bar and the hips, shall we say, that relationship of when the bar breaks the floor or the plates break the floor, the hips shoot up into the position we call the standard pulling position, right? That is unanimous in every deadlift. If you watch Ed Cohen, deadlift 900, he does exactly that. He does low hips and he shoots up into that position. You know, same with Eddie Hall and all these people. Name a world record deadlift done in conventional. It will, no matter where they start, their hips and their shoulder position in relation to the bar, it will pop up into the standard pulling position because of the physics of it. Our ability to produce force off the floor is in relation to your lats, right? And that position happens to be 90 degrees on the shoulder, and that happens to be a certain height in your hips. So it's kind of like in the Matrix. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So the standing pulling position is everywhere. It's in a snatch, it's in a clean, and it's definitely in a fucking deadlift. So changing your footwear, whether it's ballet shoes, five fingers, or weightlifting shoes, you're going to eventually be in the starting standard pulling position. The difference is we start you in that position, and we don't want to fuck around with your shoes because we already know they're useful. So we don't need to mess around with those things. Those are the two things I would say make us stand out in a deadlift.
I'd say that 100%. When I was training at the powerlifting gym a couple months back, it was constant. Every single deadlift I saw in there was the same. Every single person would drop their hips. Most people would set up over midfoot, so they'd be in the correct position. They would drop their hips, and either they would knock the bar forward, or their whole body, all their shoulders and almost all their head would drop back behind the bar, and so they'd be off balance. And every single rep, when it was heavy, would always do the same thing. They'd shoot back into the standard pulling position, the hips would shoot right back up, their shoulders would shoot forward, and they'd be where they should have been at the start. Of course, trying to explain that to any of them was a completely a completely fruitless task.
That is a full seminar lecture. You can't explain that to these monks in 5 minutes. No way.
What about sumo?
Woo!
There's plenty of wannabe powerlifters out there. There's plenty of skinny boys and girls who would say something like, well, sumo allows you to lift more weight.
It
So
does.
isn't that better? Isn't that better to have a bigger, stronger deadlift by sumoing? What would you say to such a person, Byron?
Yeah, I would say that problem, if we go back to the criteria, is it invalidates the criteria that we're trying to hold up about training the most amount of muscle mass and the range of motion. So by altering that position and artificially lowering yourself to the ground, the total distance the barbell has to move is less, okay? When I say it like that, sometimes the words, they don't mean anything. So the way to kind of understand this is if you just take like something like a broom, like a long broom handle, or if you're in a gym and a barbell, and just take a conventional stance and look at a landmark behind you, or find where the height of the bar is that lines up with something behind you on the wall. Notice how high that is. Now, start to widen your stance out, and you'll notice all of your body becomes lower, and the bar is therefore coming down lower as well. So this sumo stance reduces the distance the bar has to be moved by basically artificially shortening your legs, okay? Sounds like a good idea. But the trade-off of that is that it then it brings about a start position and a training effect, which then diminishes the actual training effect around the joints and around the muscle groups that are working. So we're not getting the most amount of muscle mass is not then getting trained, okay? We can go back also and we can refer to those world record attempt lifts which were not pulled in sumo.
Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting that they did not use sumo to do that. The most recent, I think, was Hapful.
If you pull a world record sumo, it just doesn't count. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Yeah. So it's
and this is a real world thing. If I'm on my phone and I'm happily scrolling and I see a heavy bar on the floor and I'm thinking that person's about to deadlift, the minute I see that person's foot go out, I'm scrolling. I'm not watching it.
Well,
I lose interest instantly. The first time that they see that first foot go out, I'm like, meh.
I tell you, there are you know the name of the first man to conventional deadlift 500 kilograms. We all know it. He's probably listening. Hi, Eddie. We all know about Hathor pulling 510. In the intervening years between Eddie pulling 500 and Hathor pulling 510, there have been, I think, 6 or 7 fellas who have sumo deadlifted 500 kilograms or more. Do you know any of their names? Did you hear about any of it? Because it's cheating. Nobody cares. It's that simple. It's embarrassing to be seen sumo deadlifting in public. And certainly, if you come around any of our gyms, you're straight out the door, son. Not interested.
But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. I do have a caveat to make for sumo. If you are competing in a competition, and I've used this with clients. If you have an affinity to showing me like you can make good progress on a sumo, and I'm looking at the lifts, I'm like, I really want to push this squat and this bench, but I think they would actually get more out of a sumo because it's a competition that's sumo. I've let people sumo and with good success. So it's not like I hate sumo. It's like, it's more like, okay, it's more like the barbell row. It has some utility, but it doesn't fit in every box for me. And the other thing which I like about sumo is for people who have really shit leg drive, who can't really push from their legs. Sometimes running a cycle of sumo can make them feel leg drive. So then when they go back to conventional, I'm like, well, you know how we were pushing through the floor? Now you're going to use that in your conventional setup. And sometimes that works really well. So it's not that it doesn't have a place in training. Andy Baker talks about this as well. He says, for argument reasons, like if you are a conventional deadlifter, having an off season where you build up your sumo can help. I could see some utility to that as well. It's just universally, right? What is the thing that we're worried about in the gym? It's time. How much time do you have to fuck around with sumo and high bar and this and that? We want to create a crystallized level of things so you don't need to mess around. You've just got 5 things, do them really well, and they'll actually train the whole body, get you really strong, and they'll make progress over time. So whenever we have to pull out the ingredients and change things, it's like, yeah, special occasions, sure, you might have this and that, but the people who sumo deadlift, they still have to conventional deadlift. You can't get away with just doing sumo deadlifts forever and ever. Anyone who is strong at sumos is probably also, if they're of sound body and mind and they actually understand training, they realize what we've just said. Muscle mass, weight on the bar, range of motion. The sumo doesn't provide that 3 criteria. So eventually, whether you try to escape it or not, a person who sumo deadlifts has to put conventional deadlifts in their training. Whereas the way we train, if you're a conventional deadlifter, you don't have to sumo ever in your life, right? And you can say that about all the lifts. If you squat, you don't have to front squat. If you press, you don't have to do dips, right? Or inclines, right? You don't have to. If you bench, you don't have to do push-ups, whatever. It's just all these lifts are complete in that regard. And I think, again, it's very difficult for people to wrap around how well put together and designed this is because you can't deny that. And the people who do are just trying to make excuses for being a bitch and a pussy and want to get around like, oh, I'm the special case. I'm the snowflake. I need this and that. And it's like, no. You're just afraid of some hard work and dealing with a few niggles and setbacks. But that's life, you know?
Yeah, I think what you say there is very true. And, you know, when we've gone through all of these lifts in this episode, you know, we're not saying that the alternatives necessarily are bad exercises, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with a high bar squat. There's nothing wrong with a front squat or a strict press or a sumo deadlift or, you know, any other variation you want to look at. But like you say, we've got limited training time. We want the biggest bang for your buck possible, and we want to get strong. and we've got these criteria, and doing these exercises the way we describe them is the best, most efficient, most effective way to get that result. It's not that a high bar is a bad exercise. It's just that the low bar is better to do what we want to do. Yeah. It's that simple. Because sometimes, people can get upset and offended. Like, yeah, we tease the sumo deadlifters, but, it becomes a kind of a camp thing and they think we're on the attack. And, yeah, it's funny, but it's not about that. It's not about that sumo deadlifting is bad or evil or wrong. It's just not as effective at doing what we want to do as the way we do conventional pulls. Anything to add?
I think maybe just one thing that is important with the deadlift is that learning to set your back, knowing how to set your back. That's something you'll get from a good starting strength coach, but I don't see that just naturally occurring, even, Jack, when people have, the 5-step thing you were saying earlier, just here's the 5 steps. If someone can't teach it, the client can't necessarily learn it, and they don't know that they're not doing it. So I think that's pretty important as well.
Most people struggle a lot to set their back. Now, if, hypothetically, Byron, someone was struggling to set their back and they were interested in getting some help from that, where could they find you for that help?
Well,
how's that for a segue?
Jack, I thought you'd never ask. Okay,
I was born to be in broadcasting.
Exactly. Yeah. Easy to find me, easy to message me. If you're having that problem, this is not a long time to fix that at all. You can reach out to me through the internet. I'm my website, strengthrevolution.org, or just go through the Starting Strength directory, put my name in, Byron Johnson. I'll come up there as well. You can get my details from there. But strengthrevolution.org.
And Carl, if someone wanted to learn how to press like you,
oh well,
how could they reach you?
Funny you mentioned that. So my website is Beautiful Strength Gym, all one word, BEA Beautiful Strength Gym. I'm also on IG, X, Facebook, YouTube. Check me out there, Beautiful Strength Gym.
Sweet. And, if anyone's interested in growing a thick and luscious mustache, my Instagram is jack_castironstrength or castironstrength.co.uk. You can reach me at either of those places. This has been part 1. Tune in a fortnight's time for part 2, where we'll cover the power clean, the bench press, and the chin up. This has been the beautiful, no, not the Beautiful Strength podcast. What am I talking about? This has been the British Strength podcast. Thank you for listening. God save the King.